Hello, this is Wayne Visser. I'm founder and CEO of CSR International, and today we're with Colin Higgins, who is a lecturer and researcher in CSR at Victoria University in Melbourne. Welcome to you, Colin.
Great to be here.
You've been doing quite a lot of research on the business case, and I wondered if you'd start out telling us some of what you found.
Well, I think part of my research program is oriented around why and how companies change. And as I've been working in this field for the last 10 years or so, I guess my interest has started to focus on why organisations don't seem to be changing. When I did my PhD research and I was undertaking my literature review, what I seemed to notice was that there was a continuous recycling of ideas and arguments. And when I talked to businesses in the field, one of the things that struck me was this idea of constraint around the business system. So it seemed curious to me that the business system was both pitched as the driver for effecting change in the business and society relationship, as well as appearing to be one of the constraints. So as I digged deeper into this, I realised that the business case is limited, I think, in affecting the type of radical institutional change in the business and society relationship that many of us would argue is necessary. And I think this is an issue for practitioners as well as for researchers. Most of the research, I think, is based, most of the research in corporate responsibility appears to be based on very modernist assumptions about change. And that is, if we can convince managers about the morality of doing good, we assume that they'll do it, when I don't think that's the case. And where I have come to focus some of my attention is that many of the arguments around demonstrating that doing good will lead to doing well, I think also under-specifies the actual processes of effecting some kind of social change.
Now, one of the things you seem to have found is that the business case doesn't act as much as a driver as we maybe thought it did, and also that some of the language of the business case is very different to the language of perhaps social justice and environmental sustainability.
So where I think the business case does have a role is as a second order driver. So I think once businesses have appreciated that there are some changes required in their behaviour, the business case is valuable for selling the message internally to the internal stakeholders. And I do talk to a range of middle-level managers that say, we need to provide a case, we need to put this case forward to the board or to the senior management team, etc. But I don't think it exists as a driver for effecting that first order change. And I think that comes more from studying social movements. I think it's the social movements or the change in norms and values more generally in society that provide a basis for the business case. So as researchers, I think we need to be studying how those norms and ideas about business and the environment and about business and society do evolve, that do provide a catalyst or do provide the jolt for managers to then seek to find the business case.
Can you give an example of some norms that have changed, that have resulted in business following suit?
Well, I think there have been a range over time. I think particularly around equal employment opportunity, for example. If we look back 100 years or so, we would see business organisations being structured along very paternalistic lines, and that reflected some of the values and the norms in the broader society. As developments have changed around women in the workforce, these have come to be reflected in the way business organisations come to talk about and come to structure their activities to respond. And I think at the moment in Australia there are a couple of issues that are worth studying. One is climate change, that has appeared on the corporate agenda, which most businesses are talking about in a particular way. And there's a business case being constructed around that. However, what we see supporting that is a social movement that has put this on the corporate agenda. The second one, which I'm particularly interested in at the moment, and I'm in the process of working some research through around this, is Indigenous employment in this country. That is, this is an awakening social movement and we're observing some response on the part of business, but we don't see that being driven by business, which I think is the key message.
And you're not saying that the business case doesn't exist, but perhaps just that it's not such a simple relationship, it's not perhaps a primary driver, and also perhaps that it changes over time depending on how the norms change.
Yes, I think I think the business case is seductive to us as researchers because it does provide us with the vocabulary to talk to business, and I think a lot of the research has been motivated by that aspect. It's better for us to get business to do something than to do nothing, and if we can speak their language, they will do something, and that's probably a good thing. What I'm concerned about in relation to that is whether or not by supporting the business case we lose sight of and distract attention from the broader, more substantial shifts that are required. I guess what I find concerning is the idea that we can solve the problems of business as usual with more business as usual. Or if we think about issues around sustainability and sustainable development, that the challenges of the developing world, lifting them out of poverty, raising their standard of living and so on, can somehow be solved by giving them the opportunity to buy a Big Mac.
So what would you advise then for people working in CSR? How should they change their focus, given that they have to use the language of the business case? What is it that they can do around changing social norms?
I think we can seek out innovative examples. I think if we look for companies that are the first movers, for example. So some companies do respond very, very quickly to these kinds of things. We can study those and we can understand, because I think the business case actually only exists for the first movers, and then we see a range of institutional drivers that leads to this pressure to conform to these norms. So we need to study what the catalysts are for the first movers, and I think we also need to then look at other innovative examples of social movements, social enterprises, or key actors that are able to translate their message from the social sphere into the business community. And I think a very good example to study is somebody like Al Gore, who, in terms of putting the climate change issue on the agenda, could have written a book, or he could have produced a documentary. But what he did that was quite innovative was produced a documentary and released it in mainstream cinema, and that has been part of an innovative practice that's helped to shape that social agenda.
Well, thanks very much. Very
Fantastic.
interesting. All right.
Thank you very much.